talk about England. Fun fact, reminder, whatever, this is a technology-free zone. Okay, so you will notice we are rewinding the clock. Going back to 1497. We're gonna follow England for a little bit. First, some key terms, of course. You getting close? Okay. So, we mentioned this before, but reminder, after Columbus's findings were publicized, a bunch of European countries basically went, oh, shoot, we missed out on an opportunity, we gotta go. England does the same thing. At this moment in time, we're talking King Henry VII. King Henry VII goes, shoot, that guy came to my court 10 years ago, gave us a little presentation, I told him to get lost, but, so now he's like, he's regretting that, really wishing that he had been the one to bankroll Columbus. But so he's like, we're gonna be playing some catch up. So, his first choice is this dude, John Cabot. And coincidentally, your first key term on the PowerPoint, right? So, John Cabot, 1497. Off this guy goes. His homework assignment was to, is your hand raised, sir?
Yeah, you said 1497.
1497, yes. So what this guy does, let's see. Oh yeah, so I was about to tell you what his homework assignment was, right? That's all. His homework assignment is to, you guessed it, find the Northwest Passage to Asia. He's like, okay, I can do this, I got this. Off the dude goes. He goes, does a little scouting trip. He goes across the Atlantic Ocean, hits Newfoundland, and guess what he says? He says, I found Asia. We've seen this before, right? Except it was with Cartier in like 1534, 1535. So this is happening 40 years earlier, 40 years before Cartier does this thing. So he decides what you and I call Newfoundland is China, but he wants to settle, well, create a settlement there, right? Create a town of some sort. So he gets all excited about it, rushes back home, and in 1498, he sets off with a large fleet of ships and a whole bunch of people who are going to settle this imaginary China. Problem for Mr. Cabot and his buddies, they sail right off the pages of history. We don't know what happened to them. They simply disappear from the historical record. Best bet, probably sitting on the ocean floor, right? Mid-Atlantic ocean floor. But they're going so high, they're going high enough, they could have hit any number of problems, storms, icebergs, whatever. We don't know, but they're gone. They just disappear. The king, this is King Henry, right? He gets so discouraged, he's like, well, that sucked. So he's like, okay, not doing that again. So it's not until 80 years later that England is going to try it again. However, this time, it's not the monarch behind it, it's a company, a business. They call themselves the Cathay Company. Anybody know what Cathay refers to? If you and I were to move the word forward a few centuries and go with American English, we would call it China. So, in other words, right, the company is named the China Company. Gee, I wonder what they want to do. So, they hire, a bunch of people. The main one, certainly the one you and I are concerned with in this class, is Martin Frobisher. Fun fact, Martin Frobisher before getting hired on, had a real job. He had been a privateer, a pirate, working for the monarch. He's got sort of a monarch's stamp of approval to play pirate. But now, dude's going straight. He's got a real job. And he's told, and you would all be able to say this by now, but he's told, what we want you to do is go find a Northwest Passage. In this case, part of what's driving this is they get a charter from the monarch, and the monarch's like, I'll give you the charter, but it's your own dime. But they said, look, you can go west to find China, you can go north to find China, you can go south, but you can't go east. And they're like, okay, but we do happen to know, everybody knows you go east, you can locate it. Monarch's like, yep, true, but pick any other direction you want. Not that one. Anyway, off they go. This guy sails into the frigid waters of northern Canada. Checks it out. We're not too worried about voyage number one. Voyage number two, dude comes back to the same area. And on this voyage, he found what he thought was gold ore, and he carried 200 tons of it home on 3 ships. Class, what did Marty here find?
Money.
Yeah, iron pyrite, right? Fool's gold. So, in this case, he's pulling a Jacques Cartier, right? Jacques Cartier had done this decades before. You'd think these countries might want to communicate a little bit, but there's some gaps there in their communication. So yeah, 200 tons of rock he takes back, and so you know he's making England bigger, one smidge at a time, and making North America smaller. Anyway, but so like the professionals look at it and they go, okay, if we work out the math on this thing, it's worth 5.1 pounds sterling per, per ton, yeah, per ton. So, you know, the specifics don't matter necessarily, but the larger point is simply that these guys, the professionals in England, the assayers, are saying, you've got gold, and it's worth some serious money. So the cafe company's excited, Mr. Frobisher's excited. He goes on a third voyage, same place, Northern Canada, but he goes, last time I brought home 200,000 tons, that was nothing at all, I got this. This time, larger fleet, more people involved. They go around a place that today is named Frobisher Bay, and they dig, mines all the way around. So, this time he takes back, check this out, 1,350 tons of ore. 1,350 tons of ore. Takes it back. So, there's more smelting going on. It takes the folks in England a surprising amount of time to figure this out. But a few years down the road, they go, dear cafe company, we've got some bad news. You know all that gold Marty brought over? It's worthless rock. So, this guy loses his job. Like the whole company goes under, right? Company, poof, gone, bankrupt, out. So, he's looking for a new job, but he has a slight problem with his job history. If someone's gonna, well, you know, on the application, reason for leaving last job, he has to put, well, I brought home a crap ton of iron pyrite, and it was a really expensive journey, expedition, and I single-handedly ran my company into bankruptcy. You know, that's not really gonna grab someone's attention. They're not gonna be too inclined to hire a fellow like that. So he returns to his life of piracy. He's like, fine, I'll go back to what I used to be doing. That was lucrative enough. So that's what he does. Okay. So England now starts talking about, gee, I don't know, instead of going to the extreme far north of Canada, maybe we should shift interests back southward. This next fellow is sort of he's a pivot point of sorts. He's not all the way there, but he's moving them southward. But this guy decides to go establish colonies in a place you and I would call Newfoundland. In 1578, this guy takes off with a fleet of ships. His half-brother, yes?
You said 1578?
Yes.
Okay.
1578, he takes off with a fleet of ships. One of those ships is captained by his half-brother, a man named Sir Walter Raleigh. Walter Raleigh, by the way, is one of your key terms. We'll have much more to say about him in just a moment. But for now, Mr. Gilbert. They go to Newfoundland, scope the place out. He says, this looks like a great place for a settlement. I'm gonna go back and grab some folks. We're gonna come back here and establish a settlement. Class, if you had to predict what happens next, what would your prediction be? About this dude and his expedition to Bordeaux? a certain odd pattern of sorts occurring. One, you will notice it feels like everybody is going to Newfoundland and mislabeling it, right? Okay, so boys number 2, off they go to settle Newfoundland. Did it work?
No.
It did not. Why?
They all died.
Yeah, they all died. He says, man, when I grow up, I wanna be like John Cabot. So he doesn't, and he pulls a John Cabot. He and his buddies sail off into oblivion, never heard from again. A couple of you are playing on your phones, it would be marvelous if you stopped. Okay, so, long-term effects, nothing really came of it, except some, overall discouragement among the English folks left behind. His half-brother does more stuff, at least as far as you and I are concerned. This guy tends to be more involved in Ireland, which I skipped over, because, this is not an Irish history class, but this guy does more where we are concerned. So, the monarch of England at this time is Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth has a nickname. Does anybody know what that nickname was? Yes.
Virgin Queen?
Yes. Queen Elizabeth is named the Virgin Queen. So part of what's going on here, a major piece of this, is, okay, she's single, she becomes queen, and all these folks from all over Europe, all these young men are coming courting or trying, right? Like, to put it in modern terms, they're trying to ask her out on dates, and she's like, nope, not interested. It's not really my thing. Here's her deal. She was worried that, given the amount of attention she was receiving and whatnot, basically her response was like, look, I don't have time for frivolous things like romance and family. She's like, I gotta focus on governing this country. So she was hardcore all about must make England a success. That was her deal. So she was always thinking about what can I do to make England a success, which was one of the reasons why this guy, again, goes back to a career of piracy. Queen Elizabeth I was like, dude, you and a whole host of others, you're gonna go be pirates for me. Anyway, so, despite that, word on the street, among historians, right, is that Queen Elizabeth apparently thought this dude was hot. Like I said. So, in other words, the dude has friends in high places. And this works out well for him, at least, in terms of what he wants to accomplish in the beginning. 1585, this guy gets a royal patent from the Virgin Queen to explore a very large chunk of land called Virginia. Class, where did Virginia get its name?
Virginia.
Yeah. So,
I said Virgin
and of course, when these folks back then said Virginia, they meant a much larger chunk of real estate than when you and I think Virginia, right? We think of the state. So for him, Virginia is a much larger piece of land. I do find it interesting, by the way, that, I don't know if you've seen commercials trying to get tourism flowing into Virginia, but their little phrase is always, Virginia is for lovers. I'm like, you wanna learn history, little state of Virginia, and figure out where your name came from? It's kind of interesting. Anyway, okay, so to give you advance notice for your framework here and notes you might take, this guy goes on, has basically 3 plans. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. I will walk you through them. Some are, well, more important than others. from our perspective. So, so he gets, that royal patent in 1585, right? And it says that he can explore Virginia, but he decides he's gonna tweak it a little bit. So for this guy, plan A is, he's gonna grab a bunch of military guys, ex-military guys, and he figures they will hang out on an island, off the coast of what is today Virginia. He says they're gonna hang out there, make that their base, and they will go from there, and they'll go out into the Atlantic and raid French shipping. It would have been more profitable had he decided to raid Spanish shipping, but that's not what his plan was. They're gonna raid French shipping, as the French ships, go up the Atlantic. Well, plan A, to make the story short, plan A does not work. It's just, it never becomes a real money-making machine, and it falls apart within like a year-ish, something like that. So, 1586, this guy's like, okay, so the whole piracy thing doesn't work out, what next? He decides now that he's gonna go through with the terms of the royal patent, to not only explore but settle Virginia. He goes back to England, and he does not go with him, but he sends 200 families to settle at a place called Roanoke, Virginia. Gee, class, how's this gonna turn out? Yeah, right. You guys know this stuff, it's not gonna go well. So, one of their leaders, is a guy named John White, prominent merchant, but he's like, they get there, he's like, look guys, if we're gonna make this settlement permanent, I gotta go back immediately and get, a ton of supplies. So, he heads back, he's like, I'll see y'all later. He comes back, it takes him forever. He does not return until the year 1590. Class, when he returns, what does he find?
No.
Not gold. Something else, did I hear something else?
Nowhere. No one.
No what? What else does he not find? Basically, any evidence that anybody had ever actually been there. The settlement is so demolished. The guy's like, there's not even like piles of rubble or something that said there were houses here. There's just nothing, with one exception. You will have seen this before, most of you, but, okay, this marker is not real. This word carved into a tree trunk. John White's looking at this, he's like, what does that mean? What the heck's that supposed to mean? Short answer, he didn't know. Nobody could figure it out afterwards. We still don't know for sure. Historians have, in recent years, put forth two ideas about what it may have referred to. Historians, group A, think that maybe this was their way of saying, hey, John White, or whoever shows up, we have moved to a place named Croatoan. Option B is, dear sir, or madam, we have moved to live with the Croatoan Indians. The problems that I see with those views is that if that is what they did, given the number of folks from England pouring into the region in the years that followed, they just keep pouring in and moving ever westward and westward and westward. Surely they would have run into these people, or with the passage of time, maybe their grandchildren or something, some kind of evidence somewhere, something. But nobody ever does, despite how many people came over, how thoroughly they explored the land, settled it, etc., etc. They never find anybody from the settlement, or any descendants of anybody from the settlement, so, yeah, some mystery there. One of history's mysteries. But anyway, so basically this guy goes, okay, note to self, plan B did not work. Colony didn't make it, so he's lost a crap ton of money. But he goes, okay, plan C, I will go off in search of El Dorado. It's like, good luck with that, sir. Good luck with that. Off he goes. He and his men start cruising around South America, searching for El Dorado. And while thus engaged, they end up raiding 2 Spanish outposts and doing some plundering and, you know, taking away some valuables, carting off the valuables. The King of Spain is very, very, very angry. He writes a letter to the King of England. And the bad news for this guy is that his friend Elizabeth has passed away, and the person who replaced her on the throne is a Scottish guy. He was King James VI of Scotland. He has become King James I of England. And King James can't stand this guy, doesn't like him. So we've got the Spanish king sending King James a letter saying, this guy's been up to no good. He's like, so the New English king is like, I guess you say King of England, but he's like, okay, well, I'll take care of that. When he comes back, when he finally arrives back in England, he ends up having the opportunity to have a date with Madame Guillotine. So this guy gets his head cut off, and the king writes a little letter to the King of Spain saying, in essence, we cut the bad guy, cut his head off, I apologize profusely, that'll never happen again. I hope we can still be friends. Sincerely, Jimmy. Something like that. So, he exits the stage. But he did, you know, establishing a settlement that hung on for a year or two-ish, right? He's making progress. Like, England is making progress, although obviously baby steps in terms of exploring and settling North America. Okay. This brings us to a more familiar crowd. So class, this is the cover of one of the books John Smith wrote. Anything odd about this cover? Or to rephrase, today, if you pick up a hardcover book, order it on Amazon, pick it up at a bookstore, whatever, and you want to see a picture of the author, where can you find that picture?
Inside the book.
Yeah. Dust jacket, right? Go to the back, open up, look at the dust jacket. There's a little postage stamp sized picture. Not John Smith, no Sir Bob. That dude's on the cover. Big as life. Filling up so much space they can hardly fit the title in. So anyway, class, what's John Smith's deal? What's his story? You might know? Or Phil, Great Enough Adventure, I guess. What's the story we always hear about Mr. Smith here?
He slept with Pocahontas.
Okay. In your considered opinion, do you suppose he is accurate?
Like the picture.
What you're talking about?
Oh. No, not really.
Good thinking. Good thinking. So, he is famous for not, okay, well, he writes 3 books. He presents himself in these books as like this brave, tough, global adventurer, always on adventures, going different places. The story that comes to you and me, the one that you and I are exposed to, we're in the United States, is the Pocahontas story, right? And he writes about it And so he writes it in his final book, which was published in 1630. And by that point, it appears that by that point, he felt like he could say whatever he wanted about the other characters involved in this thing, because they had all passed from the scene. So, he writes in his book that basically, Rod outlines, he gets captured by Powhatan, Pocahontas' father, and he says that they were about to bash his brains out, right? They tied him up, put him on a rock, they're about to bash his brains out, and here comes Pocahontas running in, throwing herself on top of him, and she's like, "Daddy, don't, Daddy, I'm in love with him," this kind of thing. That's his story, right? So, many generations of historians reading that book have fallen out of their chairs laughing because of the absurdity of it all. One of the things that historians have pointed to, one of the problems with this story, is that during the time period this guy's talking about, Pocahontas would have been an estimated 9 to 11 years old. 9 to 11. Little kid. A little kid. So it's not gonna happen, Mr. Smith. Nobody knows. So that's problematic with this story. But the other thing is this, the other, red flag, if you will, in every single, he's one of those authors, he has trouble coming up with new plots. All three of his books contain a similar type of story, where, so like in one, he goes to, Hungary, he is captured, he's taken as a slave, but the slave master's mistress takes a shining to him. She can't help herself, she just falls in love with him. And so she sets him free. And then the other story, similar part of the world, he's cruising around in, gets captured, someone's gonna kill him, and once again, some beautiful young lady saves his life. So it's this flip on, the old stereotypical Prince Charming coming to save a princess thing. In his case, in all three of his books, it's, I was about to get killed, and some beautiful young woman came and saved my life. Happened 3 times. He's got this, they just can't keep their hands off me vibe. But, what a handsome devil, right? What a handsome fellow. Anyway, so the point is, because historians are aware of that, right, they're dying laughing, going, nice work of fiction, buddy. Nice made-up story. In more recent years, historians looking at it through the lens of an ethnographer, I guess you'd say, ethnographer and survey historian, have looked at the Powhatan nation's patterns, belief system, stuff, customs, all this stuff. So, Pocahontas' dad, Powhatan, was a leader of the Powhatan people, and larger, the Powhatan nation. Or you could call it an empire, maybe that might be more precise. What he's doing over the years is he's making his empire bigger by grouping in these other tribes around the edges. He pulls them in, he's like, okay, you are part of my tribe, no, my nation, whatever. He's like, you're mine. How does he do this? His adoption pattern, this happens over and over again. But what he does, he would go to some Indian village, he'd capture some high government official, chieftain, somebody, and take them home to headquarters and get them all tied up, he'd lay them down, and he's ready to bash out their brains. And here's Pocahontas waiting over here in the wings just for the right moment, and she comes charging out, throwing herself down, going, "Daddy, don't kill him." So it appears, because, what would happen is the guy would say, okay, my daughter saved your life, lift that guy up, and they're like, you're ours now. Your whole tribe belongs to my nation, welcome aboard. When I say jump, from this point forward, you will say, and how high would you like me to jump, sir? So, with that pattern in mind, suddenly Mr. Smith's story looks very different, right? It does lend some credibility to it. It appears, however, the basic parts of it did take place, but that this guy, viewed it through his own lens, the way he wanted the world to be or whatever. And of course, he didn't have the information that we do about what Powhatan was doing. So, with this guy coming along, Pocahontas is like, oh yeah, I totally know my job in this little, whatever, skit we perform. I know what I'm supposed to do. So, she's just playing out her assigned role that her dad gave her, and he's thinking, I don't think he thought this in real life. I hope he didn't. But in this book, he's like, she can't keep her hands off me. She's hidden alive. So yeah, now, just within the last 15 years, historians are going, okay. So it wasn't 100% fiction from Mr. Smith, just some. Well, Mr. Smith arrives very early on. Jamestown, the city of Jamestown, settled 1607, right? So this is the first settlement that's actually going to make it. It's actually going to last. Okay. So originally he was one of the colony's leaders, but he was very autocratic, wanted to be in charge, he's dictating policies, micromanaging people, and people are like, who does this guy think he is? He was basically universally despised. They did not like him. In 1609, so only 2 years after they arrived and settled Jamestown, this guy gets injured in a gunpowder accident, goes home to England, and never comes back. So, he's out. He's gone. So, Jamestown, though, the place where all this stuff is happening, or at least allegedly happening, is part of what comes first? The Virginia Company. Okay, let me be more precise. It's the full name of the company is the Virginia Company of London. So, folks, I got this map from, shorten it to London Company. And that's confusing, because in all the U.S. history textbooks, it's always called the Virginia Company. But in real life, it's one of those all of the above kinds of options, because it's the Virginia Company of London. In the future, you're going to see a similar naming pattern, but what they're saying is the Virginia Company of London. Virginia Company means we are interested as a company in the land called Virginia. Of London means London is the company's headquarters. So you will see as we move forward, a couple of the companies similarly named, same basic concept as far as this is our headquarters, this is what we're interested in, that goes in the name of the business. At any rate, so King James I grants this company 6 million acres in North America, and he straight up tells them, look, we need an empire over there that rivals France, rivals Spain. We're playing catch up. We're way behind. We need you to do something. So, the Virginia Company was a joint stock company. So, and again, this is a very common type of company in Britain at the time. Joint stock company, the way they funded this, the way they funded this was they would sell stock, right? So people would buy stock in the company, and that's how they paid for the Atlantic crossing, the supplies, etc., etc. So, we won't dive into the details here, but suffice it to say, lots and lots and lots and lots of people are very optimistic about settling in Virginia, and so they bought shares. Why are they optimistic? Because folks living in Roanoke, before they did their Vanishing Act, wrote letters, a surprising number of letters home, and the letters just gush over conditions in Virginia. They're like, this place is so awesome. Weather's wonderful, it's so beautiful, tons of natural resources that have not been tapped. You're gonna love it. Everybody should come here, this kind of, so letter after letter after letter after letter, it sounds like that, is being circulated in England, published in the newspapers, etc. So that's why, even though that one, you know, obviously fizzled out, by this time, everybody's heard of Virginia and a whole lot of people are interested, and they're pretty optimistic. Please get off your phone. Doing this with your phone.
I'm just changing the song.
You what?
I'm just changing the song.
So theoretically, you would be listening to me, not to music.
Yeah, I'm listening to it. That's what I have on my computer.
At the same time?
Yeah,
You're good at multitasking?
that's why I'm doing it, yeah. Not so sure that would be the right time. Jamestown Fort. But first, the Virginia Company Press. So that's what it looks like, the official company press, Merchants of Virginia. This is Jamestown Fort. Shape is this glass?
Triangle.
And what is at the points of the triangle? What are we seeing?
Big,
What?
big house.
Okay, and what, get out of here somewhere?
Energy.
Yeah, so there's, it looks a lot sturdier, right, than the straight parts. It's built up, the idea is that these are the lookout points. So they've got lookouts posted, and the idea is that between the three of them, they can see all over the place, see everywhere. Okay. So they've got a little, it's a defensive fort, right? So they built it with defense in mind. Problem. The folks in Jamestown are busy, they're mostly busy dying. That's like their thing, unfortunately. But things there suck, they're busy dying. One particularly interesting's on word, but particularly famous episode, the winter of 1609 to 1610 goes down in history as, quote, without starving times. As in, people in Jamestown are starving to death. They're freaking starving to death. So, 1624, the King of England steps in. He says, hey guys, I couldn't help but notice, dear Virginia Company of London, that all your people are dying off, you are making no profits, you're struggling, so I'm taking over the colony. At this point, the Virginia Company of London, not in a great position to do much, like, not in a great position to even argue with the king, because at this point, not much in the way of investment, nothing really is going back in terms of profit, right? All these people who've invested in the company are expecting profits rolling back this way, and they're going, where are my profits? The guys over there are like, dude, relax. So, they're like, we're too busy dying, do you mind? Cut us some slack. So by this point in time, the Virginia Company is being sued by a zillion people and entities. We talk a lot about modern society being a litigious society. Well, 1624, England, big time litigious society. All these people suing
to get their money back. And of course, the Virginia company doesn't have it, it's long been spent. So the Virginia company ends up going under. But the colony continues, but instead of as a private venture, it's with the king in charge. He's like, I got this, I'm sorry. Okay. So, 1612, game changer for the folks in Jamestown. John Rolfe shows up. Why do we care about John Rolfe, class? He manages to, somehow this dude has acquired Spanish tobacco seed. It is, according to Spain, it is illegal for anybody who is not Spanish to have Spanish tobacco seeds. But he's got them. Somehow he's got them. And he brings them, he plants them, and it takes a while to get going. It doesn't happen soon enough to save the Virginia company, but pretty soon, tobacco is flourishing in Virginia. Tobacco becomes, their big cash crop. So, King takes over and thinks he's the one who saved it all, but really it's John Rolfe. John Rolfe, puts the piece in place with his tobacco seed, and Jamestown ends up becoming America's first boom town. I mean, you could make that argument. So what happens in Jamestown is the plantation owners, tobacco plantation owners, become incredibly wealthy. Rich, 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 rich. So, sort of this odd, arc from a number of years. People keep coming by boat, but people just are dying off at a horrendous rate, and then that slows down in time. Important piece for you to be aware of. I said a week or two ago that Native Americans helped save the Jamestown colony. How did they do that? Well, Pocahontas' dad, essentially. Pocahontas' dad tells his students to bring these guys some food. So they're bringing all sorts of food. They are, so one example, during one winter that was particularly bad, the Indians brought corn to the English, and by eating corn, 38 of them survived the winter. Not very many, but, crucial matter, they're not gone, right? There's still people there, they're still in Jamestown. So, yeah, Pocahontas' crowd, her dad, saved Jamestown colony during those really tough times. Something definitely worth noting. Okay. John Smith, writing in one of his books, wrote, so the dude's talking about Virginia. He writes, here, every man may be master and owner of his own labor and land. If he have nothing but his hands, he may, by industry, quickly grow rich. End quote. What do you think, class? Is John Smith right? Nope, why not? It was the correct answer, but why? Yeah.
Was it because most people that went there were indentured servants?
That's a huge piece of it. We are sort of transitioning into that, where that's coming. But, so part of it, William, stay with me for a moment. Part of what's going on, like, he's writing about it at this one moment in time, early on, when things are looking pretty crappy. But yeah, so that's a huge piece of it, right, indentured servants, and later slaves, right, so he's like, yeah, by your own labor, you can become rich. It's like, okay, well, the plantation owners largely became rich because they had indentured servants working for them. He's wrong, but not terribly shocking coming from Mr. Smith, right? Okay, so, the indentured servant issue. Planters, tobacco planters in Virginia want laborers. Tobacco is reportedly a very difficult crop to plant, harvest, process, all the stuff that goes into it. Apparently it's extremely labor intensive. So these guys really want a labor force. The problem these rich guys have is that the people who come across the Atlantic land in Jamestown and, the old settled guys are like, hi, you wanna come work for me? And they're going, no, I don't. I'm independently wealthy. I didn't come here to work for someone else. I came here to start my own plantation and get filthy stinking rich. So that's what I'm gonna do. Time goes on, more and more, these guys are like, what the heck are we gonna do to solve this problem? So, the indentured servant system is their answer. So, I'm gonna go off this for 1 second, we'll be back, indentured servants, poor people who wanted to, generally young people, late teens, early 20s, they wanna come to Virginia, they have no dinero. The answer is, essentially, they take out a loan from a ship's captain or a wealthy merchant, and then the loan, sort of like student loans today where they get transferred from one banking institution to another. These loans get transferred to tobacco growers in Virginia. So these guys end up coming to Virginia and they sign contracts that say basically, I will work for 7 years to pay off my debt, the cost it took to bring me over here. So they are now not quite owned, but sort of in that gray area by the plantation owners who sort of take on that debt. And so then like, okay, I now own your debt, you're gonna work for me 7 years, right, and then pay it off, and then you can go free. Do whatever you want. So these folks are working it off, 7 years. So, there are 4 basic realities relating to the servant labor system. One, as you can see, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but planters are so desperate for labor that when they do get those indentured servants, they are demanding as much labor as they can possibly get out of them. They are doing their darndest to work them very, very, very hard. Meanwhile, servants on their side, they're hoping to just simply survive. They're like, man, if I can just survive these 7 years, get past my indenture, I can go out, buy land, start a family, I'm gonna be rich. So, number 3, as you can see, because they've got dreams of their own, plans for the future, they're saying, man, I don't wanna work my butt off for this guy, work myself into the ground just for that clown. So, they are half-hearted workers. They're trying to sort of, keep the labor minimal, because after all, they're going, this is a fleeting moment, all I gotta do is make it through 7 years. 7 years, I can then do whatever I want, right? So that's kind of where their minds are. And for at least for quite some time, planters put up with the arrangement because other options didn't really work well. Okay, so during the 1600s, class, 80% of the immigrants to the Chesapeake came as indentured servants. So they're hoping to one day, gain economic freedom, life of their own. Okay. Let's see, is this, yeah, okay. But then, because of number 4, there's another reason, but the situation wasn't great. So, the labor system shifts towards slavery. Why? Couple reasons, which I have here. Slaves were a permanent workforce, right? They're not like indentured servants where they're gonna be around for 7 years working and then gone. They're permanent. Also, slaves were a perpetual labor force. Children of slave mothers inherited the status of slavery. So it meant as the years went by, the decades went by, these guys still have slaves, laborers, if you wanna call them that. They're saying, they're viewing it as labor. It's slave labor. And, at least early on, slaves could be controlled politically, which is, what's bothering the wealthy tobacco growers is that indentured servants, once they do their 7-year gig, they go free, they're on their own, and they've got their own dreams, plans for the future, etc. And the guys in power, the wealthy plantation owners who run the government, are going, man, these guys, former servants, are tough to deal with because, they're really disruptive. Very, very, very disruptive. So, they're not like it. Okay. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of a larger picture here of what's going on. Spain and Portugal got involved in the African slave trade early on. England, compared to those other countries, is late to join this practice. But England started doing large-scale slave importation in the 1640s in general, but it really didn't come to North America fully until about the last quarter of the 17th century. So, like 1660s, 1670s, we have a situation where African slaves are being brought in very large numbers to the Carolinas. It was the first place in the continent of the U.S. where they came. With the exception of 19 African slaves who they belonged to Portugal. But during the shipping, they overtook the ship and they sailed off to do their own thing. They shipwrecked basically off of Virginia. And so Portugal's like, excuse me, we need our slaves back. Folks in Virginia, and the English government like, nope, too bad, so sad. So they're sort of, that early group is an outlier. And in news that you would not expect, some of those early enslaved Africans in Virginia went on to gain freedom and own their own very large tobacco plantations and make some serious money. At any rate. So, over time, society in the Chesapeake region is becoming more hierarchical. Rich people getting richer, poorer getting poorer. So, as for this, there is a man who, for our purposes, functions as the poster. Let me rephrase that. His buddies are sort of the poster children, if we want to say that, for just how disruptive former servants could be. So when the head honchos in Virginia are saying these guys are disruptive, this is what concerns them. Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion. So, Mr. Bacon comes over. Important note, the dude is wealthy. He's got his own, money, got his own plans. He wants to come to Virginia, buy a large plot of land, have a tobacco plantation. He runs into a problem because he arrives in something like 1673. At this point, all the best lands along the Atlantic coast, gone, spoken for. So he's going, okay, I gotta find something. He ends up getting, he finds his way basically to the western edge of English civilization and carves himself out a small farm, small tobacco farm. So he's got one, and he has some wealth, but he's not anywhere near as wealthy as the rich dudes on the coast. But this guy is really bothered because Governor Berkeley of Virginia is telling them, hey guys, you can't keep going westward, because if you do that, you're gonna move on to Native American lands, and we don't wanna fight between Virginians and Native Americans. So you can't go west. And there's two pieces of this. There's that, which makes him go, and all his buddies, well, what if we want to? It's a free country, man. Berkeley's like, the governor's like, no, actually it's not. I'm in charge. The other issue is the flip side of the same coin. When natives attack these guys, because they are, after all, on the very edge of English settlement, these guys complain to Governor Berkeley and they're like, dude, where were the armed forces? You need to send in troops, man, to help us when the natives attack. You can't just be like, oh, well, look at that happening over there. So, that's like when the rebellion first starts up, that's like the key piece of it. That's what's really upsetting these guys. So he himself is not an indentured servant, but he ends up rising up with 1,000 people, all from, the western edge of Virginia. And the vast majority of those people had been indentured servants. They are upset because they had plans. They're going to live through the 7 years, my dreams will come true, get lovely plantations, blah, 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 and none of that pans out. So they've got they're harboring some built-in resentment. They also are concerned because in Virginia, the tax rates are really, really, really high. And it's just, financially, it's killing these guys. They're going, my gosh, taxes are way too high. Like, we can't survive economically that way. So they're mad about Native Americans. They're mad about their dreams getting, smashed up against the harsh reality of life. They're mad about taxes. They also claim that Governor Berkeley is corrupt. One thing we do know for sure is that Governor Berkeley was fond of handing out government positions to his buddies. So it's one of those, if you're my friend, you're qualified for government office. Never mind what your resume says. So these guys have a number of concerns, shall we say. So, they rise up in 1676. Anything interesting about that year? It's 100 years before Declaration of Independence, right? Well, Virginians are forever writing declarations. These guys do it 100 years before the famous one. They stopped in June, and so June 30th, 1636, 76, that was one, 1676, Bacon and his army issued the Declaration of the People of Virginia. So, this document criticizes Governor Berkeley and his rule in detail. And he lived, among those items are the things I just listed for you, and it's a lot longer, right? There's a whole host of things in it. But they're upset. So they, have an official document, send it off to the governor, and then they get more serious. This is a woodcut, of Mr. Bacon's, doing a little sparring with Governor Berkeley, they're arguing in the streets. But these guys came to the capital city of Jamestown and lit it on fire. But remember, if you ever want to practice your arson skills in a large scale, don't forget to bring the drummer. Weird. They just threw him in there in the picture. Maybe the artist just felt like it needed a drummer. At any rate, you can see that there they are going through burning Jamestown. They did not burn the entire city. That would have been quite problematic. So they burned a chunk. Berkeley, Governor Berkeley's like, what are you guys doing? Get the heck out of here. Go, be gone. They're like, eh. But while this is happening, while this stuff is going down, meanwhile, England has heard about it, right? Governor Berkeley was keeping the folks in England fully updated. So the king has already decided to ship English troops over to put down this uprising. And it turns out, though, that the uprising fizzles essentially just right before the British troops get there. Big problem, October 1676, Nathaniel Bacon dies of dysentery. So the leader is gone, and they're going, so he did have a second in command. This dude who's second in command says, okay, we'll keep on going, not gonna slow down. So, took over, the rebellion continues, a smaller scale kind of thing, it's starting its fizzling out thing. So, for a time, when these guys came to Jamestown, they chased off Governor Berkeley and all of his friends. So they took over Virginia's government. They instituted a whole series of new laws that came to be called Bacon's Laws. Obviously after Nathaniel Bacon. So those included, lowering taxes, just a whole bunch of things that they felt like would help the settlers out on the frontier. At any rate, Bacon dies, and the English troops land, right? They come ashore, and so these, 1,000 some odd dudes are like, oh, this would be a lovely time to get the heck out of here. So they flee, trying to get out of there as fast as they can. However, these British troops do manage to capture 23 of Bacon's supporters and hang them. They captured more than that, but of the ones they captured, they hung 23, they hung 23. So, the rebellion has been put down. So, we know the nuts and bolts, right, and Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion. We kind of know, okay, why the guy was upset, why he's upset. The question remains, the larger question is, why was it significant? Why did we care? Couple reasons. One, and this, by the way, is totally accidental, but it strengthened the elite planters in their positions of power. Nathaniel Bacon says, y'all are too powerful, we want to, get you to chill a bit, not, take away some of your power. Problem, once Bacon is gone from the government, and all those guys flee, Berkeley and company come right back, take up where they left off, and this time they're going, we are never going to put ourselves in a position where we can have a repeat of what just happened. So they purposely passed laws to make them stronger in their positions of power. Exact opposite of what Mr. Bacon was hoping for. But these guys do get some wins out of this. You will notice, for example, at this point the Virginia company says, okay, or not the company, but colony says, note to self. It makes much better sense to, if we're going to have a fight, it makes better sense for it to be colonist versus Indian rather than English colonist versus English colonist. Like, well, we don't need a civil war. So, basically the government says, okay, y'all, if you wanna keep moving west, go for it, man. Encroach on Indian land, go ahead and do it. It's risky as heck, dangerous, but if that's the way you wanna do it, do it. And then, look at the tax cut. The tax cuts in Virginia, the taxes, I should say, in Virginia dropped 75% over a 30-year period. So again, for those poor folks, that is a win. Other reasons, it provided an example for elites of what could happen when former servants' expectations were not met. And remember what I said about the transition to slavery as a labor force? Nathaniel Bacon and his folks, you end up, all right, this is an unintended consequence, right? Not on their to-do list, but they make slavery appear to the time as a much more pleasant option. And then, I know guys, I still got 1 minute. English colonists, century later, looking back at Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion, when they are faced with steep taxes, right? Guys, hold on. So, later, 100 years later, people facing similar challenges and bugged about it, look back to Mr. Bacon, and then he gets a nickname 100 years later, torchbearer of the revolution, meaning the American Revolution. They're like, that guy came first, he knew how to do it, we should follow this guy. This guy's got the idea down. Okay, it is just barely turned 1:50. You made it.